Hello, ladies, and welcome to another episode of Autoimmune Rehab Podcast with your host, Anna Laura Brown, who brags that she loves avocados probably almost as much as dark chocolate and just can't get enough of all the cute dogs in her life. This episode is sponsored by her 30-day self-care journal template, which you can download by going to annalaurabrown.com/self-care, and you will find the link to that in the show notes as well. And today I am really excited to have Faith, and hopefully I'm not going to get her last name wrong, Faith Hovde, will be here with me
Close,
on the
Hovde.
podcast. Okay, so welcome, Faith, and why don't you start by telling us a little bit about who you are?
Well, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here. I am on the podcast, I guess, because I'm a celiac patient, or I have celiac disease and Hashimoto's. I'm also a multi-business owner and a mom to two teenage boys. Well, one's almost not a teenager, and a wife to my husband of 20 years.
Awesome. Cool. So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about where your health journey began? So you said you have celiac and Hashimoto's. Did you find out about both at once, find about one first and then the other one? How did that play out?
I did. So I was sick for a very long time. I really can't pinpoint. After our conversation, I was trying to pinpoint when I actually started having like the debilitating symptoms. And I really couldn't pinpoint it. I've really kind of been sick my whole life. And I know a lot of people with celiac, once you find out, if you're an adult, when you find out, you go back and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I really wasn't ever quite fine. So my journey is the same, but I found out found out days before my 37th birthday or 38th birthday. But I had been sick for about 5 years, to the point of it being debilitating, where I was, couldn't get out of bed. I was inflamed, in pain, all sorts of just running the gamut of symptoms, and no one could tell me what was wrong. I went to all these different doctors, all these different specialists, and all they kept telling me was either I was fine or I was fat.
Well,
so,
yeah.
Which with celiac disease, it's it's known, you have malnutrition and all that. So it was never even on their radar because I was overweight. But I knew that being overweight was a symptom. And so I ended up actually kind of working with a nutritionist, which was the only one that listened to me, was the only one that was able to give me any sort of, I wouldn't say answers, but more relief of symptoms, working with her with supplements and diet. And so I ended up kind of giving up on doctors. But I have a wonderful friend who's a nurse, who runs a wellness clinic, and I just happened to invite her over for dinner one day, and she encouraged me to go to a nurse practitioner. And I remember going, and I was kind of like, I'm good. I'm off. I'm good. I'll just manage my symptoms. I feel a lot better than I did a year ago. So I'll just keep doing what I'm doing and kind of still be in misery, but, less misery. I'd kind of succumb to that, was my life. And, but she encouraged me to go to a new doctor. And so I went to her, told her all the things that were going on with me. And she just pulled out a lab sheet and said, we're going to do a lot of blood work. And she diagnosed me with celiac and Hashimoto's at the same time. So it was quite a shock.
Well, I bet. So you'd probably had Hashimoto's for a while then too, and that was just aggravating things and making your symptoms worse. And
Yes, exactly. And my dietitian had told me to go off of gluten, just to manage the inflammation, which made me feel a lot better. So I was already, by most people's standards, gluten-free. But then once she diagnosed me with celiac, didn't really know much about celiac, but when I started researching it, realizing that even just a crumb can make you sick for a really long time. So realizing that I really wasn't doing a celiac gluten-free diet. I was doing like a gluten, less gluten, I guess. So once I went fully gluten-free, I felt obviously a lot better, but yeah. And you know, it's good for Hashimoto's as well. So it was kind of an well, I wouldn't say easy transition, but it was an easy decision and I never looked back. So
That's awesome. Yeah, I have to say I love nurse practitioners. My current quote unquote doctor is a nurse practitioner, and the one I had before that was a nurse practitioner too. And yeah, I have to say a lot of times my experience has been that they're actually better than a lot of the doctors with their MDs. So, you know.
yeah, I think it just takes the right person to look past what the textbooks tell them and just look a little further. And that's what she was willing to do. She was willing to look at all the things that I'd already, you know, process of elimination, been not diagnosed with. And looking at, you know, when doctors are telling you you're overweight, they're usually looking for diabetes and things like that. And I wasn't even anywhere close to those things. And so yeah, it was pretty frustrating process to go through. But yeah, it's a lot better now, but it was quite the process.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely will. And I think most people listening to this, and if they don't already, we're going to tell them that weight can be, and being overweight can be a thyroid symptom too. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. And it really can be any autoimmune. I think your body, everybody's body reacts differently. And I think that's important. You know, when you're going to doctors and they're saying, well, you don't fit into this box, I think it's really important to know that you're not supposed to. You're not supposed to fit into a box. Everybody's body is different. And if you have multiple things going on, like most people with autoimmune diseases do, you're not going to fit into a box. So it takes a doctor to not just look at, oh, this is one diagnosis. No, this is multiple diagnoses. And those things are working, you know, in my case, celiac disease. Actually, in my case, Hashimoto's might have kept me alive, to be honest, because celiac disease makes you lose weight and makes you malnutrition, which I definitely was. But I was a malnutrition fat person. So, and I hate using that word fat, but that's, you know, to get the point across, I guess.
yeah, for sure, absolutely. Yeah.
Overweight. But for those people that, you know, are in my same position, and I know I'm not alone now that I'm done my research and got involved with different celiac groups, I realize it's probably half and half of people that have celiac disease that are overweight versus underweight. So
For sure, absolutely. Yeah, I actually did another interview on this podcast for anybody else that's wanting to know more about celiac disease with a man who actually has celiac, and he just has celiac, and he's probably like your normal typical weight, but he took him like probably 20 years to get a diagnosis too. And it's
yeah,
like, it's pretty common that I think one of the reasons a lot of us with autoimmune conditions have such a hard time getting that diagnosis and then getting that subsequent treatment is that we don't fit into a box. If you have an
right.
autoimmune condition, you pretty much never fit into a box, no matter what it is.
Right. Yeah. And like I said, everybody's body is so different. My body is so different. You know, and I think that's another thing to note is sometimes your flare-ups, I don't know about you with Hashimoto's, but my flare-ups look different almost every time. Like there's some things that are the same, but you know, if I have you know, accidental, I don't purposely eat gluten ever. So it's only ever if I get cross-contaminated or something like that. And so if I have something like that happen, or I have a Hashimoto's flare, then my symptoms look different every time. And then there's really no way. Sometimes I'm sick for a day, 2 days, sometimes I'm sick for 3 months. So it's really hard to gauge.
Yeah, for sure. I find with me, I'm usually over it within a week, but it's usually kind of almost like the flu, but not really the flu. It's
Right.
kind of like, I'm kind of like, oh dear, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Yeah. It hits me different every time. But and with the hardest part of being sick for me was that I have multiple businesses to run. I have a family to take care of. I have, you know, a husband to take care of, and I couldn't do any of those things. And so then the mental aspect of that, you know, it was hard to stay positive. It was hard to, you know, when you can't even get out of bed and you're a high capacity person normally, It can mess with your mind. So I've had to do a lot of work on my mindset, which as a life coach, that's what I help other people with. So I had the tools, but even though I had the tools, it was, forcing myself to use the tools I had. So
For sure, absolutely. So let's talk about one more question related to health, and then we'll move on to talking about the business aspect. So did you make any other diet changes at all after your diagnosis other than giving up gluten?
So I did. So I follow an autoimmune diet, which is basically just clean eating. When I was working really hard to heal my gut. And like I said, I was working with a nutritionist who specializes in gut health. So there was a lot of changes, and it was I'd already done an elimination diet, so we already knew it was definitely gluten. And then of course there was some other things that were irritating to my gut for a while I was healing. So I cut out dairy for a while. I cut out basically anything inflammatory, corn, anything with sulfurs or anything like that. So yeah, there was a lot of dietary changes in the beginning. But now that my gut has healed a little bit, I don't find that I need to be dairy free. Although because I was dairy free, I found a lot of alternatives that I actually prefer, like lactose free ice cream, for instance. I prefer it. So, and it's, I know it's not going to upset my gut. So I just kept that around.
That's awesome for sure. Okay, so now let's transition into talking about your business. So you mentioned you run multiple businesses. Did you have those businesses before you got diagnosed?
I
And then
did.
how did you deal with that initial sickness phase? You get diagnosed and initially you're really sick. Did you have to stop the businesses, or were you able to like hire help to kind of keep it going a little bit? How did that work for you?
Well, to be honest, not well.
Okay.
I was to the point, towards the end before I got diagnosed and before I started my healing journey, I was very, very sick, and I was down for the count pretty much at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I would push myself, to get up and do what I had to do for my business and for my family. But 4 o'clock, I would usually be starting to make dinner. And sometimes I would just be standing there, and all of a sudden just feel like someone just put a ton of bricks on my shoulders, and I'd have to go lay down, and I'd be down for the count. And so my husband would have to pick up the slack. So at the time I did have help. I had an assistant that was very helpful. And was able to pick up a lot of the slack. But during that time, I also lost her because she got married and moved away.
Oh,
And
no.
so that was when things got really hard. And I did end up, I was doing a lot of photography at the time. So that's one of my businesses. I ended up closing my studio for a time, or giving up my studio. I was still doing photography, but I just was doing less sessions per month. So I didn't stop. I just took it down a notch to where it was manageable for me, and kept the businesses going. So I had all of them. I just kind of reduced them, and luckily it didn't affect me financially. But that was right before COVID as well. So
Oh,
then I
no.
was forced forced to close a lot of them. But even still, just making sure that I was prioritizing my health was a big shift for me. I hadn't done that. I was more of the power through and get it done, and do what you have to do kind of person. And so I really did have to force myself. Okay, the priority is now my health, which as a mom, that's really hard because you're used to taking care of your kids and your family first. So it was quite the transition. So I had to find a way to balance that. Well, and I wouldn't even say balance. I hate that word balance, actually. I
Yeah.
had to find a way to juggle those things effectively.
That's awesome. Yeah, I can see that for sure. Yeah. And they say statistically speaking that 80% of Hashimoto's is in women, and women have a lot more autoimmune conditions than men. And I think part of that is we actually bring it on ourselves because we don't prioritize our health and we don't prioritize our self-care. So
Right. Absolutely. I agree.
until we get forced into it and then we realize, oops, I just crashed and burned. Now I have to.
Yeah. And honestly, a lot of my coaching practice now is I specialize in entrepreneurs. So a lot of times we talk about the health part of it. If someone's coming to me and they're telling me that they're exhausted and they're fatigued and they're not handling stress the way they used to be, the first thing I do is recommend going to their doctor and getting their hormones checked, getting their vitamins checked, getting all the physiological things taken care of. Because I think those are the things that, yeah, we're told to go to the doctor and get a checkup, but we're not really told that it's not normal to be fatigued and to be tired and to not be sleeping and to just be hungry all the time. You know, all these things that go along with illness, chronic illness, those are so common that we have accepted it as normal. So that's the first thing I will tell people to do if they come to me for coaching.
That's awesome. So you do business coaching and life coaching, and you still do photography? Is that still part of your business?
I do, yeah. And then I own a retail store as well.
Oh, wow. You really do have your hands full, don't you?
I do. Now I have help. So, during COVID, I did have help, but we were working out of my house. So it was quite the adventure with my dogs and kids running around. But now I have a full staff and it works a lot better. And, the things that I have to prioritize for myself, I'm able to now pass on to my employees. And that's really important to me. And I encourage any business owner, that has employees, give the employees the flexibility that you desire yourself, and it works a lot better.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. I can see that. What kind of retail store is it?
It's a lingerie boutique.
Oh, well, okay. You
Yeah.
do have your hands in multiple things.
I do.
That's got to be kind of fun, though. So now let's transition a little bit into, so suppose somebody, we've got probably a woman, they could be a man, but they have found out they have an autoimmune condition, or maybe they've known they've had it for a while, and maybe they've been working a corporate job and they've just kind of are like, we want the flexibility, we want to start our own business. What would be a couple words of wisdom that you would give to somebody who's in that position, who's got an autoimmune condition, they're working on improving it, and they're thinking that they want to start a business? What would you say?
Oh gosh, that's a multifaceted question.
I'm sure it is.
First, the beauty of obviously I'm an entrepreneur, multiple businesses. So I believe in entrepreneurship. I think it's the only way that you can truly control your time and your money. So big advocate for entrepreneurship. However, I did not jump into, I did not have the knowledge that I wish I had, which is part of the reason I became a life and business coach. I didn't have the knowledge of how business worked, how to keep it running, and how it was going to affect my family. And so, just talking to other entrepreneurs and people that are doing what you want to do, I think is a really valuable thing, or hiring somebody like a coach to kind of help you through that and give you kind of the reality of what it's going to look like. Even if you're doing something like, let's say you're working in a job and you're going to, open a business doing that same job, it's going to be totally different doing it as an entrepreneur versus under someone else. So just having a reality of what that looks like, talking to other entrepreneurs, doing your research. And then on the autoimmune side, just making sure that you are prioritizing your health, number one. So as you're structuring your business, making sure that you are structuring it in a way that allows you to have the downtime you need, to go to the doctor appointments you need. I know for me, if I don't have my massage appointments and my chiropractor appointments, those are like my priorities. If I don't have those, my body starts to hurt. Fatigue starts to set in. And so, just those things that are your priorities, and making sure that those are inserted into your business plan. Because that's something that most people don't think about when they're putting a business plan. It's all numbers and or all the fun stuff, and they don't think about inserting their health and or their family into their plan.
That's good. I love that. Yeah, I actually do massage and chiropractic too, and actually I do acupuncture too. So
yeah, I'm certified in EFT, which is kind of like acupuncture without the puncture.
Oh yeah, like the just the
tapping
tension.
therapy,
Yeah.
and man, it's amazing. So it's similar to acupuncture as far as the points that you're hitting, but yeah.
Okay, awesome. Cool. Well, if you could give people a resource that you think that they should all check out, whether that's like a book, a website, an app, something like that, what would you give people?
Well, if you have celiac disease specifically, there is a couple groups on Facebook that I will tell you are the place that I get the most information, that I have gotten the most information. I actually added my husband to those groups because, you know, we were all learning about celiac disease and all the things. I mean, gluten is in every single thing. For a long time, I was getting gluten from my dry shampoo, of all things.
Whoa.
And so,
Geez.
yeah, which seems weird, but you inhale it and it goes down your throat. And, you know, anyway, but I didn't realize that until someone posted in this Facebook group. So I guess overall, if I had to give an overarching recommendation, it would be diligent. Find a doctor that listens to you, or multiple doctors that listen to you, preferably. Um, and if you have an autoimmune disease, you know that already, get with a nutritionist that specializes in gut health or autoimmune. It has made a life and death, quite literally, difference in my life. So that, and then just find a community. That's you know, the Facebook group is one thing, but find a community of people that understand you and can support you, because you don't always have that support. Your friends and family want to support you, but in autoimmune, as you know, there's things that are going on in your body that no one can understand, and sometimes you can't explain. So find a community that understands and can walk alongside you.
I love that. That's great. I know there's a lot of location specific ones too. So for me, I'm in Utah and there's a Facebook group called Gluten Free Utah that I'm in that
Yeah,
has a lot of really good stuff.
right.
People asking for recommendations on restaurants and saying, hey, is this
Yeah.
place celiac safe and all this kind of stuff, you know? And so, yeah.
Yeah, I actually I'm going to Vegas next weekend, or I got on a Las Vegas celiac group just to see where is safe, where can I go? And now I'm, you know, walking in there confidently, walking into Vegas confidently, knowing where I can eat. It's one of those things that, you know, you don't you take for granted, just being able to go to a restaurant and eat whatever you want, but you have to be really careful with celiac. So
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So why don't you give us your website and any other contact information you want? We'll obviously include that in the show notes as well, but you can just speak it to us so people can hear you say it too as well.
sure. So my website is www.confidententrepreneur.net. I had to think about that for a second. And you can find me on Instagram and Facebook, and I think we're on TikTok as well. But the best way to reach me is either through my website or through Instagram. That's the thing that gets monitored the most, but it's just Confident Entrepreneur on Instagram.
Awesome. Cool. So any last words of wisdom or anything else, Faith, that you want to share that I didn't address or didn't ask you about?
Gosh, I don't think so.
Okay. Awesome. Well,
Thank
thanks for
you.
coming on. I think this is some great things for people.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.